Okay, so I tweeted about this yesterday and got some really interesting responses, so I decided to talk about it today. I've been self-censoring on the program, or censoring myself, as some would say, over the issue of recent anti-Semitic attacks all over the world, all over the country and all over the world. My instinct is never to do this. If there's a story that I want to cover, I cover the story. But I will be very honest with you. The degree of anti-Semitism that we've received across all platforms over the last 2 weeks, just for my coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, without actually talking about anti-Semitism really, has been insane. We have had to ban hundreds and hundreds of people across our platforms, from everything from calling me a Jew rat to people saying blow up all Jews, blow up Israel, which I consider to be just as unproductive as those people who claim that the pro-Israeli side wants to blow up all Palestinians. Like it's just as disgusting. And I did something that I don't feel great about, which is I didn't do a story that I wanted to do. Since last week, I wanted to do a story about how criticism of the Israeli government and foreign policy, which is valid and in which I participate myself and have for a long time, that has become cover for, fuel for, and opening for just out and out anti-Semitism and even physical violence against random Jewish people or people believed to be Jewish out on the streets. Normally, I'd be telling you, but I haven't, about all of these different things. And yesterday I tweeted, if I'm completely honest, I hesitate to do a segment covering the anti-Semitic attacks and beatings of the last week because I don't have the stomach for the deluge of anti-Semitism that such a segment would trigger against me. Even the responses to that tweet were filled with anti-Semitic comments, which immediately led to me just blocking a whole bunch of people. And I'm not going to highlight any of those messages today. But I've decided to talk about this today, partially because of some of the positive responses I received, and also because it's already not being talked about enough. As I see coverage of this issue, the anti-Semitic attacks are already not getting enough coverage. And if I don't talk about it, I'm helping for it to be erased. And I can't do that. Now, for some reason, there are some on the left who do not talk about anti-Semitism, either because they believe it conflicts with their views about Israeli foreign policy, which is a different topic. Israeli foreign policy and anti-Semitism are two different topics, unless you only talk about the former to hide the latter, but that's a very specific case. Some on the left don't talk about anti-Semitism because they see Jewish Americans as an elite privileged group, which in and of itself is actually based on an anti-Semitic trope. So I know that this is going to be a mess. I know we'll have to block another few hundred people, but we have to talk about what's been going on. For example, 3 men went to a synagogue in New York City, made anti-Semitic comments to just 4 dudes hanging out outside, and vandalized the synagogue. A synagogue in Chicago has been vandalized. Thursday night, a random Jewish man in New York City's Times Square was beaten up just in the middle of the street, a beating. 29-year-old with a yarmulke in New York City, assaulted by a violent mob, called a filthy Jew, a dirty Jew, saying Hamas will kill all of you and Israel will burn. Guys, that's not a criticism of Israeli foreign policy. That's anti-Semitism. In Los Angeles, a group of people went to a sushi restaurant and shouted anti-Israeli comments at people they believed to be Jews while brandishing a deadly weapon. In Bal Harbor, Florida, Eric Organ said he was walking with his family while vacationing when 4 men in an SUV began yelling anti-Semitic comments. Organ was wearing a yarmulke. The men shouted "Free Palestine" and "Die Jew," as well as threats to rape his wife and daughter. They threw garbage at the family. Feces has been left outside of a synagogue. Another man torched a Jewish community center. Synagogues in some places are now hiring armed security. I could go on, but it's not necessary because the big picture is that officials say hate crimes against Jews are growing dramatically in the aftermath of the recent Israeli-Palestinian flare-up and violence. We are witnessing a dangerous and drastic surge in anti-Jewish hate, said the head of the Anti-Defamation League. The Anti-Defamation League has identified 193 reports of anti-Jewish incidents in the last week, 135 reports the week before. And the point here is, and I really wish that some of the anti-Israeli people understood this, when Israel does something and Jews around the world, many of whom have never been to Israel, most of whom have never been to Israel, are attacked on the streets, it makes more and more people say, wow, I might have to move to Israel someday. I hope people understand this. If you really want to help make progress on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and get more people on your side, like me fighting for a safe and fair situation for Israelis and Palestinians, lifting the blockade, stopping the settlements, getting leaders on both sides that actually care about the people in a real way, right? Don't do stuff that makes Jewish people say, holy, it's insane out there. I might need to move to Israel to feel safe. This is the great conundrum. The more of this stuff that goes on, the more people will say, I don't care what Israel does because I might need to flee there someday. And we saw this in Europe as anti-Semitism exploded under Trump, not because of Trump, but during the Trump era, we saw the far right nationalist movements in Europe and anti-Semitism. The desire to move to Israel for safety went up. So the best thing that these people can do, if they can put their anti-Semitism on hold for a second, is don't make random Jews around the world feel unsafe. Don't make Jews on the streets of New York City feel so unsafe that they say, I might have to move to Israel to be safe. Okay, so it's an incredible conundrum and so counterproductive and obviously toxic and disgusting. So listen, I know what a lot of the reaction will be to me doing this segment. But I can't not say anything about it. Let me know your thoughts. You can find me on Twitter at Pakman.